Okay, good morning. I'm Stelios Piperidis. I'm supervising MetaShare, and I'll be talking about the rationale, why MetaShare has come to bear, and where we stand today, and where we intend to be in the months to come. So, data is the crude oil of today's research and technology development. This is a standard motto by almost everyone, be it politician, functionary, researcher, technologist, whoever. And actually, it looks as if data is a word that has the same frequency count as functional words in this conglomerate. On all language technology-related lists, from corporate lists to linguist lists to empty lists to whatever, okay, whatever top of list, whatever sort of list, there are requests like, I would like to get hold of English to X, where X can be from Russian to Bengali, Punjabi, whatever, parallel corpora, or I want syntactically annotated corpora, or I would like to know whether your parallel corpora are aligned, whether they are validated, by what extent, etc. Down to a very recent discussion on the corpora list on how one can identify language in Twitter streams. This is a discussion that started last Monday. Similar requests that have to do with resources, be data or basic language processing tools, have surfaced in all the vision group meetings that were held by MetaNet on the way to the SRA. They surfaced and they were articulated as what we call the domain-independent needs, so needs that cut across all possible priority themes. So data, need data, more data, big data, open link data, big open link data. So you have data and you can nest as many modifiers as you can to the left. The point is that although people need data and although we have the feeling that there are substantial bulks of data but also of technologies out there, only a portion of them is known, only a portion of them is announced, is shared, or is even traded. Actually, there was a study somewhere, I think it was sometime 4 or 5 years ago. It was contracted by ELRA, and it showed that something like 20% of the resources that we presumed existed at that time were announced to the public, only 20%. The point is that data collection, cleaning, annotation, curation, maintenance is a very, very costly business, and at this time of crisis, it looks that we need to find a model to cut down the costs on this, to improve the situation so that we can foster better research, better technology, and innovation. This is something that is already happening in other domains, in biotechnology, in the geosciences, in the geodata area, in the earth sciences. There is evidence that data and tools become viable through opening, sharing, reusing, recycling, both for research and technology development, but also for evaluation and also to support innovative applications. Coming back to language resources have the idiosyncratic feature that are dynamic living entities. Language is a very living thing. They evolve over time, as language does, in various dimensions. They can increase in quantity, they can increase in depth, annotation levels, they can be converted to new formats. New languages can be added, especially with a view to serving multilingual purposes. They're usually the product of collaborative work, so I do part of the annotation, somebody else does something else, or I add my corpus to an already existing one. as well as they may come with varying restrictions of use. So what it seems to be necessary is solutions that can enable every language resource provider at any granularity level, from researcher, an individual researcher, to a lab, to an organization, to create his own store of language resources, data and basic language processing tools, to be able to describe, to document, and update resources, but also descriptions of resources, to be able to link his own store to a network of other providers' stores, and to be able to keep track of the use of his language resources, and possibly, if so desired, trade them. On the other hand, we need solutions that enable every language resource consumer to discover what LRs exist that are suitable for his purposes, get information about them, download, license them, or acquire them via any sort of transaction. And this is exactly what MetaShare is trying to do. MetaShare tries to match LR providers and consumers in terms of their needs and expectations by enhancing the visibility of language resources, by increasing the potential of better documentation, better identification, wider availability, and possibilities for longer-term preservation of language data and language processing tools, basic language processing tools. It is an open, non-monolithic, it is a dynamic, expandable, secure exchange network of language data and tools, primarily for the human language technologies domain, primarily for this area. It is something that we've just launched. We know that it will take time till it actually flies, but let's see where exactly we are right now. So let's see where exactly we are today, what we've been developing so far. According to the MetaShare architecture, the current MetaShare architecture, you can have an infinite number of repositories of resources, each with its own inventory. Repositories export, transmit descriptions of their resources. These descriptions are harvested by MetaShare central servers that create their own holistic inventory of the whole network. These MetaShare servers are synchronized at all times. There are multiple points through which you can enter the network and you have the same view from whatever point you enter. Through the MetaShare portal, a user can register, can get authenticated, and can get authorization to use specific types of resources, but also services like search and browse the catalog, license a resource, download the resource as soon as he has licensed it, get statistics about the use of the resource, provide mappings to existing other catalogs. I'm coming back to this later on. Get reports on how many times a resource has been used, for what purpose, by whom, etc. Get recommendations of the sort that this resource is suitable for use with that type of tool or with this other resource. And last, if there is any financial transaction that is at stake, we will be offering billing and payment services. Now, coming back to mappings, we know that we do not operate in a vacuum. We know that there are other initiatives that do similar things somehow, in the sense of collecting data about data. And what we would like to do is to provide mapping services so that their catalogs can be mapped onto the MetaShare catalog and increase, if you want, the information potential, the information service provision potential of the whole endeavor. What you see in the green box, the light green box, so repositories and central servers, is the data provision backbone, okay, the resources, provision services. And the upper half of the architecture deals with the user-oriented and support services. Where are we right now? The backbone is ready. We're testing the harvesting and synchronization protocols and software right now. And with the exception of recommendation, and billing and payment services, all the rest of the services have been implemented and have been released in version 2.1 of the architecture. Let me go a bit deeper to what are some of, let's say, the functionalities that we currently offer. On the provider side, as I said, MetaShare is a network of distributed repositories. On the provider side, researchers and language resource providers are offered facilities for documenting and updating descriptions and storing and linking language resources on their repositories. I'm really sorry for the fact that this is not very visible over there, but it is a screen dump of the metadata editor that comes with version 2.1 of the MetaShare software. So the metadata editor will prompt you to provide information about the resource you're about to describe and later on upload. Information starts from administrative and technical info and goes down to, for instance, distribution information, how the specific resource is to be distributed, what are the specific restrictions, etc. And you're also invited to pick up one of the recommended licenses that MetaShare, one of the licenses that MetaShare recommends, or if you want, describe your own license and somehow provide specific information about the terms that are included in your license. Metadata is at the core of the whole thing. We use metadata to describe LRs, to search and retrieve them, browse them, but also to upload and download them, to harvest metadata so that we can create the central inventories, and later on to monitor their use. They come in two basic tracks, if you want. Two basic types of entities. The core entity is the language resource, but there are also satellite entities that participate in the creation and evolution of the resource. So, quite briefly, an excerpt of the ontology that is implemented in the metadata model appears on this screen. So the core entity is the language resource, which can take one of these four values. It can be either a corpus or a lexical conceptual resource, a tool or a service, or a language description. It should be accompanied by a license. It may be accompanied by information concerning projects during which this has been implemented, has been developed, implemented, or used. We need to know the actors that have participated in terms of creation, annotation, distribution, etc. And if one wants to provide ancillary documentation like annotation manuals, validation reports, standards that have been used for the creation of the resource, etc. I would like to focus on one thing. Here we're talking about reuse, recycling, etc. So what we have tried to do in the model is to implement a multidimensional analysis of a language resource object. Take, for instance, the various types. You can have a data set that consists just of text. This is normally the case for written corpora. If you have spoken corpora, you can have the audio stream, which you're interested in, or you may be interested just in the transcription, or in both. If you have multimedia, and if you have non-moving multimedia images, then you have the image itself, which may be commented by a legend. So again, you have two modalities here that are at stake, image and text. And if you have video, you may be interested in the video itself, its keyframes, etc., or the subtitles of the video, or the audio of the video, or even the transcription of the video if this is transcribed. Why all this? Simply because if I want to search for text, then ideally I would like to get hold of all possible textual modalities that participate in LR objects. So text from written corpora, transcriptions from spoken corpora, legends from multimedia, from non-moving multimedia, from images, and subtitles and transcripts if the case is that we're searching for a video. Right. So now, on the MetaShare user side, users, language resource consumers, can search the central inventory. They can browse it using multiple facets. Again, I think it is not very visible, but what you can see, if you can at all, is that there is a Google-like box where you can enter your query on the far right, and then you get the list of all the hits that respond to your query. You can then filter this list using multiple facets that correspond to aspects of the metadata model that appear on the left side. You can access the actual resources by visiting the respective repositories, and you can get a view of the details of the resource. Actually, it is a presentation of the information that appears in each record. You can, if you're interested, you can download the license with which this resource is being made available. You can tick a box, you can agree on this, and then you can download it. For any problem that may pop up, be it the case of data provision or be it the case of data consumption, we offer an online user forum where people can ask questions. If they're kind enough, they can also tag their questions, that this is a technical question, this is a metadata related question, or this is a question that has to do with the legal stuff that is associated with the whole process. Their question is immediately forwarded by mail to help desks that are manned by appropriately skilled staff, and then you can get your query. You can get your query answered, and the answer will appear here and will be visible by the whole community. What we're currently doing is to develop a mechanism that distills the best answers to each question and structures them in a knowledge base that is also visible by all MetaShare users. A few words about the organizational and legal framework that is one of the critical points in such endeavors. The constituent documents of MetaShare, the whole thing is governed by 4 different level documents. We have a charter, the MetaShare Language Resources Sharing Charter, which is a high-level principles document that is already in your folders. The charter is depicted onto a memorandum of understanding, a type of membership consortium agreement, where we stipulate the core service terms and we provide a description of the network structure. From the memorandum of understanding and the membership agreement, we migrate to the legal transactions that are at stake, which come in 2 flavors: agreements for depositing language resources, data and tools, but also the licensing terms under which the specific data set or resource will be made available. Coming directly to the licensing terms, we have decided to go for a field and court-proven set of licenses that are based on the Creative Commons licenses. So it is an inclusive mix of open, but also openness-inspired licensing models. So through MetaShare, the recommendation is that one uses Creative Commons licenses or MetaShare Commons licenses if you want just to restrict the distribution and use of resources inside the MetaShare network. And if distribution or redistribution is a big problem, which actually seems to be, one can opt for MetaShare, for the MetaShare no redistribution licenses. I'll come back to this in a moment. As far as basic language processing tools are concerned, there, legally, the situation is a bit more stable, and what we opt for is one of the standard open licenses that are available, BSD2 close or BSD3 close, AGPL, LGPL, GPL, etc. The rights in the licensing models are based mostly on the type of use rather than the type of user. So we're not that much interested on who you are, we are more interested on what sort of use one intends to make of the resource. We provide standardized differentiation of licensing models along the following axes: attribution or no attribution. Although in our research world attribution seems to be a non-questionable issue, I can tell you that when we released version 1.1, it happened that we got a mail from a big American company saying, okay, we're interested in resource A, but we have no problem with your licensing terms, apart from one, attribution. We cannot attribute. So this is, for our world, this is solved, okay, for the commercial world, this is not solved. So we are obliged, if you want, to provide this distinction, attribution or no attribution. The second distinction is whether the thing, the language resource object, will be open and shareable with everybody, or it is shareable within the network only. The third is whether the original can be redistributed or it cannot be redistributed, which is one of the big issues today in reusing language resources, especially when the primary content comes from other sources, when we're talking about corporate or when we're talking about multimedia objects that are the result of some effort in a broadcasting organization or something like that. The fourth dimension is the differentiation between commercial or non-commercial use, which could be reflected on commercial or research use, although it is not the same. The fifth is the differentiation between allowing or disallowing derivative works. And the sixth is whether you oblige the user of your resource to use the same terms as the ones that you have used for licensing the specific resource. This is what we call share alike. For us, this sometimes is legalese and highly complex, and it proves that it generates lots of questions to our community. We have interactions with something like 30 organizations, and there are topics that are really difficult to grasp. What we try to do is to diagrammatically, schematically provide a panopticon, let's say, of the features of each license. So if you want to share inside MetaShare, these are the options. We provide 6 different templates, and for each template, we provide its characteristics. So if you read the first line, you just, the only thing that you negate is the share alike feature, which means that you ask for attribution, you allow commercial use, you allow derivatives, etc. MetaShare no redistribution licenses, which seem to be the most popular one, according to the statistics that we have gathered as to the popularity and usefulness, if you want, the templates we've come up with. Here, the idea is that you protect the original, which is something that is puzzling many of us. So we provide 8 templates with a fee or non-fee feature that you can toggle on and off depending on your projections. Again here, we differentiate between commercial or non-commercial use and allowing or disallowing derivative use. Drawing on our experience so far, I mean, it is an experience of something like 6-7 months already of interactions with the community on the use of these licensing tools. If there are any remarks or recommendations that we would like to discuss, is first, please clear before you share or you upload. Make sure that you have the right to provide the specific data set or the specific tool, and you have got the necessary rights for doing so. Once you've done this, try to use standard licenses. It looks as if, so far, the licensing toolkit that is provided is field-proven, at least for the last 6 months. Okay? So in almost all cases, it was possible to map the individual projections onto what we already had available. And why we insist on standardized licenses? Just for one reason. We're talking about interoperability at the technical level, but here, one of the crucial aspects is interoperability at the legal level. Because if something is interoperable technically, but you cannot use it for any sort of legal restriction, then it's useless. So try to use as standardized licenses as possible, and we hope that what we have provided does the job. For any sort of comment, differentiation, specification, sub-specification, etc., I mean, we are open to make any adaptation. Concerning limitations, the rule of thumb says don't limit unless you absolutely need to do so. There is much more to gain when things are open than when things are closed. So think very, very carefully before you apply the most restrictive license that makes you feel safe. It may not be the case that it is the most beneficial scenario. Last but not least, as I said before, we have established this user forum and the help desks. Use our services, use the services that we offer, write to us, post on the user forum, and I'm pretty sure that we will find a solution out of this maze of legal complexity. Just one word about the structure of the network as it stands at the moment. I will be focusing on the blue, red, and solid yellow lines, circles. So the blue circle is the circle of the members that run their own repositories. A subset of these members offers user support services. And some of the members that do not have the capacity to run their own repositories can be depositing only members. They can deposit on any non-local repository of MetaShare. So one can opt to be a depositing member without running his own repository, a member that runs and maintains his own repository and maybe also accepting data sets and software from other members, those the depositing only members. You can be a member that offers additional user-oriented and user support services. To sum up, the MetaShare software is out there. It is open source. You can find it on GitHub. It's a GitHub project. It is offered under a permissive license, a BSD, and you can use it to set up a language and source repository. There are a range of legal instruments that cater for a range of uses. There are mapping services. If you already have a catalog, a substantial, sizable one, then we can have a discussion on how we can merge, if you want, the two things. This is something that has already happened at the LRAP level. There are software-based services that are offered both for LR providers and LR consumers. And there are also the commensurate user support services in terms of the user forum and the help desks, as I said. As I'm running out of time, I will not be talking about the numbers, okay, of types, media types, and languages that populate MetaShare repositories right now. Just what is next in the months to come. Actually, this is the end of July 2012. We are coming out with version 3.0, which will feature improved user and access rights management. It will cater for different roles in the resources lifecycle. What we have tried to do, we have tried to model what happens in the big research centers, where you have individual researchers describing their resources, ingesting them into their repository, and then you have a manager who publishes them and broadcasts them to the network. So all these roles, all these different roles are catered for by the new version. We will provide an optimized search engine. We have improved the single resource view. Recommendation services, automatically generated recommendations will be featuring in the next version. We have got substantial feedback from our partners, and we'll be fixing some of the usability bugs, together with, of course, ensuring migration from version 2.1 to version 3. We also expect more MetaShare nodes and respective language resources to be integrated by the end of July, in the period, to be honest, in the period from July to September, since we have to cater for the summer break. We will have integrated the LRA-supported initiative, the LRA map, and the language library that was launched at LREC. The MetaShare platform and the MetaShare framework will be adopted by LRA, so at the LRA level it will be the MetaShare technology that will be used, together with the mapping from the current LRA licenses on the MetaShare proposed licenses. We will be working with Clarin on mappings to other resource inventories. There is already discussion that started a month ago on mapping CMDI to MetaShare and vice versa. And last but not least, there will be full deployment of the services of LRA and members of the MetaShare network for software availability and maintenance, language resources storage and preservation, as well as legal support. Thank you very much, and sorry for taking